Okay, let's dive into one of the most compelling and honestly, one of the most mysterious figures in the entire book of Isaiah, the servant of the Lord. For centuries, people have been trying to solve the puzzle of who this figure really is. And today, we're going to walk through the clues together. You see, the text gives us all these clues, but they don't quite line up at first. Instead, they create this fascinating puzzle that has captivated readers for thousands of years. The book of Isaiah lays out this really complex portrait, building the mystery piece by piece. So let's follow that trail of evidence. All right, our investigation really kicks off in Isaiah chapter 49. Now, the servant is mentioned before this, but it's here in chapter 49 that the focus just sharpens dramatically and the whole thing starts moving toward a climax. At first glance, the answer seems super straightforward. The text gives us a name right there. It identifies the servant as Israel. You might be thinking, well, mystery solved, right? It literally says, "You are my servant, Israel." It doesn't get much clearer than that, or so you'd think. But wait, just when we think we have the answer, the text throws in a major curveball that complicates everything. See, Isaiah doesn't just hand us an easy answer and move on. It's actually forcing us to dig way deeper into who the servant really is and what he's all about. So now, let's get to the real heart of the puzzle. This is where we see how the text builds up to a central paradox. And this is where the real detective work begins, trying to make sense of two statements that seem to completely contradict each other. And here it is, laid out plain as day. In verse 3, the servant is Israel. But then just a couple of verses later, we're told the servant's mission is to restore Israel. So how can the servant be Israel if his whole job is to gather Israel back to God? It feels like a total contradiction. So the crucial point we're meant to get is that this figure is somehow both the nation and separate from it at the same time. And this isn't just a mistake or a simple contradiction. It's a very deliberate literary move that pushes us toward a much deeper, more nuanced understanding of who this servant is. So how does the text solve this puzzle? Well, it starts to zoom in. The solution it offers points toward an individual, one person who perfectly embodies the ideal role that the nation was supposed to play. So think of it like this. This individual servant comes from the nation of Israel, and he represents Israel's true calling. But he is also distinct from the nation because he's going to succeed where the nation as a whole failed. Remember, Israel was called to be a light to the world, but as the text points out again and again, it was often rebellious. So this one individual steps up to fulfill that mission. And the way the text describes this servant, it's just beautiful poetry. Notice this pattern here. He is both effective, like a sharp sword and a polished arrow, totally ready for his mission, and at the same time, he is protected by God, hidden in the shadow of his hand and concealed in his quiver. This is no ordinary person. He's uniquely equipped and divinely shielded for what's ahead. And get this, his mission is huge. Restoring his own people, the tribes of Jacob, is actually described as too small a thing. I mean, wow, that's just the starting point. The servant's ultimate purpose is to be a light for the Gentiles, that is, all the other nations, bringing God's salvation to the ends of the earth. This blows the mission up from a national scale to a global one. Okay, so we've kind of figured out who this is, an individual. But the next logical question is how? How is he going to pull off this monumental task? Well, the answer takes a really surprising, even shocking turn. Isaiah chapter 50 reveals that the path to this global salvation isn't going to be through military conquest or political power, the usual ways you'd expect. Instead, it's through a path of total, perfect obedience to God, which leads him directly into voluntary suffering. This completely redefines what victory even looks like. And this comparison is just so key. On one side, the text repeatedly describes the nation of Israel as rebellious from birth. Their suffering in exile was an involuntary punishment for sin. But then look at the servant. He declares, "I have not been rebellious, and his suffering is totally voluntary. I offered my back." This sharp contrast really solidifies his identity as someone completely different from the sinful nation he came from. But don't mistake this suffering for weakness. Absolutely not. This path of suffering doesn't lead to defeat. Instead, it reveals an incredible, unbreakable resolve. The servant isn't some passive victim. He is an active agent with unshakable determination. Facing humiliation, spinning, and beatings, the servant declares with total confidence that he has set his face like flint. Flint is a super hard rock. It's this powerful image of just unshakable determination. He knows that with God helping him, he won't be disgraced in the end. He's going to be vindicated. In other words, proven right. So, what a journey, right? We've gone from a mysterious figure to a baffling paradox, and then to a suffering yet triumphant individual savior. And it leaves us with one final big question to think about. Why has this specific picture of a hero who saves the world not through power, but through suffering and obedience remained so incredibly powerful for thousands of years?